I'm from Memphis, Tennessee.
Still living in Memphis?
No, right now I currently live in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh, okay. How old were you when you made that move?
That's a complicated question because I kind of moved around my whole life. Like I started in Memphis, I grew up there to the age, I'd like to say till about freshman in high school.
Okay.
Then I moved to Minneapolis. I moved to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and then I moved to Portland, Maine, where I stayed until about the age of 18, and I moved back to Memphis. And I lived in Memphis for about 2 or 3 years, and I just moved back to Minneapolis, maybe like 2014.
Now, what part of Memphis did you grow up in specifically?
I grew up in North Memphis.
Okay.
Yeah, Frazier.
Okay.
Yeah, around that area.
Now, why so much different moving? Can you give us the reasons behind any of those moves?
I moved a lot because I had family all around the country. I had my mom, she's from Memphis originally. My dad is from the Midwest, so that's kind of what brought me to Minneapolis. And later on, he moved to the East Coast, so that's why I ended up in the East Coast.
Now, your parents were separated.
Yeah.
How old were you when they separated?
They separated when I was about 13.
And you ended up living with your mom at first?
Yeah.
Okay. How often was your dad in your life? I mean, obviously, you moved out at some point with him?
Yeah, he was in my life for a long time.
Okay.
He was in my life for basically growing up until I was a teenager.
Okay. Because I know sometimes a father in this scenario might leave for a little bit and come back into someone's life.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't know if that was the case with this or not.
Well, yeah, there's been like on and off times, of course, you know what I mean? Like, well, they split up and got back together and split up and got back together, you know what I mean? Throughout the 13 years, but I guess you know what it is, once he finally made the move to the East Coast, that's when it was like a real split.
I see.
So it's like I had to go see him and live with him sometimes and go live with my mom sometimes like that.
I see. You didn't get kicked out of your mom's crib and ended up...
No.
Okay. Got you. So you've been on good terms with both parents?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay. Now, was that tough, dealing with their separation?
I guess I really didn't take too much to it because I was like, by the time they separated, like I got younger brothers and stuff, it might have affected them differently, but by the time they separated, I was already 13. And, you know, I lived with my mom for a little bit, then I moved with my dad, and then, you know, I guess it really didn't affect me that much, you know.
Okay, got you. Maybe somebody's watching this and has to deal with the separation of their parents. Obviously, circumstances could be different for everybody, but
yeah.
Do you have any general advice when it comes to dealing with the separation of one's parents, maybe even at the age of a teenager?
I guess, you know what I mean, like everybody, I guess just, I mean, as far as like dealing with it, just, you know, don't try to wrap your own life up into your parents' life. Do your own thing. That's my advice.
What's an example? What do you mean by that specifically?
You know, like, you know, your parents got their life, and then, you know, later on you might become a parent in life, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's all relationships, and, you know, it's not really anything it's not a kid's business. So as your own person, you should just go out and do what's best for you, you know what I mean?
Now, you kind of gave us a little glimpse into growing up there, but give me a little bit more. What was it like growing up for those 13 years in Memphis? Paint that picture for us. What was it like growing up in the other areas you mentioned?
When I first grew up in Memphis, I lived in the hood. I lived on Schoolfield Road, you know what I mean? Tough neighborhood, real rundown, a lot of high grass, a lot of rundown buildings, a lot of broken concrete, a lot of stray dogs walking around, a lot of gang banging going on, a lot of things. You know, so I grew up and I grew up in that neighborhood. When you kind of grow up in those neighborhoods, it's kind of like the same thing for everybody. You know, you just kind of grow up in your environment. And so that was the first like 13 years of my life. When I moved to the Midwest, it was more of a suburban feel. So I kind of got out the hood, I'd say, in a sense. physically, not mind frame wise, because I was still like, I still like remained in that mind frame for a long time. But and it wasn't until I moved to the East Coast where I lived with my dad when I was 16. I got kicked out, and I started living on the streets at 16. Moved in with some older friends, you know what I mean? And that's when I started experiencing the life. So I say I kind of like hopped off the porch, got into the game at like 16, as far as like street life and stuff like that. And that's how kind of my East Coast experience went. I was staying in Maine, and then I was going back and forth from Maine to Philly. Spent a lot of time in New York, just all over the East Coast. It wasn't like one place specifically. So like, I don't know, that's kind of how everything went. And now I'm living in Minneapolis, and I'm like, I don't know, it's different for me. Because I guess I kind of grew up out of all that.
You still have family in Memphis?
Yeah, I got a lot of family in Memphis. That's why the majority of my family is, my grandmas, all of them.
How often do you go back?
I went back like 2 years ago, maybe 2015. No, it's like 3 years ago now.
Yeah, it's 2018.
Yeah, it's like, so I ain't been back for 3 years. I plan on going back this year though.
Now, let's break a few things down. You were kicked out at the age of 16. For what?
I was kicked out of my house at the age of 16.
By your dad?
By my dad, because I was living, it wasn't just me, it was me and my brothers. And I guess got kicked out for setting a poor example, let's put it like that. I was running around doing things I probably shouldn't have been doing. Well, you know, normal teenage stuff, but like for younger kids, it's probably like, shouldn't be exposed to that type of stuff, and I was probably exposing them to a lot of things that they shouldn't have been exposed to. So that's why I got kicked out.
Why not call mom and say, hey mom, I'm going back to Memphis with you? Why try to do it yourself at 16?
You know what? That's a good question. That kind of takes me back a step, because the reason that I ended up moving to the East Coast with my dad is because my mom got locked up where I was at. So she had got locked up, and I forcefully got moved to the East Coast. So I wasn't really thinking about going back at that point, and I was 16. So I was kind of like starting my own life. I was like, look, I'm gonna do what I gotta do out here at this point. I was going to school, I stopped going to school. A lot of crazy stuff.
When you say your mom was locked up, are we talking county jail, or are we talking state prison, federal prison?
No, she had to do like 2 years in prison. Yeah.
For what?
Identity theft.
Yeah. While your mom was locked up, what was that experience like with her? Did you still keep a strong relationship while she was locked up, or no?
I always had mad love for my mom, so I never felt any resentment against her for like what she was going through. I just felt like that was her own personal life. I had it pretty good growing up. Like as a kid, I stayed with my grandma a lot, and then by the time I got with my mom, that's when I started seeing all the problems and stuff. So I started with my mom and my dad, and you know what I mean, like going back and forth, and it just got crazy.
Did you communicate with her while she was locked up?
Yeah, she used to call me, I used to call her. Well, I couldn't really call her in prison, but she used to call me. She was on like a work release program. Like she had to go to jail like every week for like 2 years. So it wasn't like she was locked up straight for like 2 years. She just had to go check herself in for like 4 or 5 days every week for 2 years.
I got you. Now, you being at the age of 16, and you said you were off the porch in the streets, what were you doing back then? What type of activity were you into, street activity-wise?
Man, street activity, I don't even know if I should talk about, but like, you know, normal people stuff like, you know, dibbling, dabbling with drugs, like, you know, selling drugs type shit, you know what I mean? Like, robbing, shit like that, like all like, you know, just anything. Like, I don't know, it's the stuff that's crimes, but it don't seem like crimes when you're trying to survive type shit. I was just trying to eat, like, you know what I mean? Trying to eat, see where my next meal is gonna come from, and however it had to come, it just had to come. You know, I wasn't gonna starve.
Why not get a job like most kids at 16?
I actually had a job for a minute. I don't know, jobs never really just seem to work out for me, man. It's not like, you know, and it's crazy because, like, I'm not the type of person that hasn't worked. I probably work every job you could work type of shit. Like, from the time I was 16 to 18, I worked probably every industry. Like, I was a banker at one point. I worked in the kitchen. I did, like, mad different type of jobs, activities and stuff. But I don't know, man. It's just that I don't have the mindset, like, to work for somebody else. It kind of takes up a lot of my time, and I value my time.
Was it the drug selling that came first? Was it hitting licks and robbing first?
Not really. What it was just, I found that it was easier to make money my own way than to even have a job. And not easier as a sense of being lazy, but like there's more money in it than there is in having a job. So I'm like wasting my time with the job, and I could be moving faster, you know, paying bills, solving problems, doing whatever it is in this type of lifestyle.
Were you influenced to do it? Were you peer pressured at all? I know the survival part.
I wouldn't call it peer pressure. I would call it like I wanted to know. This is stuff that I like wanted to know how to get into when I seen other people making money off of it. So I guess it was an influence, but it wasn't peer pressure. So I was influenced by my surroundings.
When your dad kicked you out, was there any resentment towards him after that moment?
Yeah, there was a lot of resentment at first. It was a resentment against him from the time I was 16 till about 19, 20. It wasn't until I can get older and understand, see all sides of things, till I could finally forgive him. And now we have a great relationship, man. We talk, kick it, you know. It's like my best friend.
How did that happen? How did that become a good relationship now? Was it you approaching him approaching you to make this work, or if you can? Well,
recollect? I think it was something that, as far as approaching, I came back to where he lives, but it wasn't I'm coming back and we're gonna apologize for all this stuff. It was just a natural thing that happened. I hadn't seen him maybe for 3-4 years. I had grown up a lot, and we was kind of happy to see each other, and we kind of put the past aside. You know, non-verbally, we didn't even talk about it. It just happened.
You're 16, he's a grown person.
Yeah.
He kicks you out. Did he ever, after kicking you out?
Did he ever talk about it?
No, did he ever try to reach out and say, you know what, it's been a week, it's been 2 weeks, I don't want you out here on the streets.
No.
Come back.
And then what makes it worse is it's the middle of the winter too. It's cold as fuck outside. He kicks me out. I remember, you know what? I remember one moment of sympathy, now that you mention it. I remember I had got off work one day and I had nowhere to go, and he let me come in there and take a shower and eat some food maybe, and then he told me I had to leave. And then I was out, and then I was just like, man, screw this.
There may have been some sympathy there, but did you ever try to plead your case? Hey, Dad, let me come back. I won't do any of this stuff again.
No, you know what? It was just too much pride involved. Just I was too prideful. I didn't feel like I needed him or what he had to offer, because I lived, you know, with my mom for so long, and I had friends, and I had people that I knew, very good friends, very supportive friends that I could stay with, so.
Now, the thing about the street activity compared to a normal job is that it can come with some things that a normal job may not. First, it's obviously a risky path to take. There's consequences that can happen. There's certain stresses that can stem from that. There's that looking over your shoulder feeling. There could be some sort of imprisonment, whether it be jail or prison. And worst case, there could be death. You knew that from the jump when you got into it?
Yeah, I knew about all that stuff. You know, I had I didn't jump into the game in a young and dumb way, like how most kids just maybe get with their friends at their age and just go do dumb stuff. Like the way I was introduced to this life was in a real sophisticated way by people who have been doing it for a long time, and people who have done their time, learned their lessons, and kind of just passed on knowledge and game to me. So I have had, you know, troubles. I've dealt with consequences, but it's all on the way you move, I guess. You know what I mean?
Now, were you getting into street activity before your mother ended up going to prison, or did you get into street activity after she was already in prison?
Well, my mother, before she went to prison, that's a good question. I was around street activity. I wasn't involved in it. So I'd be around people that'd be doing little things, you know, selling dime sacks, whatever they was doing. I was probably like 15, you know, 14, whatever. I used to be smoking and stuff, you know, and it wasn't until I was like really 16 till when it all kind of like went left.
The reason why I ask is I wonder if her going and getting locked up, why that didn't stop you from continuing with that path.
You're onto something, I think, because you know what it was? Okay, when she got locked up, remember I said I had to move. I had to move to the East Coast with my dad. I wasn't happy about moving, and I didn't particularly care for my dad. It wasn't that I was mad at him, I didn't care for it. So at that point, like, whatever was what was restraining me from not involving myself in activities that I wasn't involved in, it just felt like that didn't matter anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I could do this stuff. I felt more free, I guess. That's what it is.
Looking back, were there any regrets with that path in your life? Going that route?
Not really. Not really, because everything's like, I mean, you know, there's good and bad. I don't really regret things in life. I just take it all as a blessing, and if it's not, it's a lesson.
Was it worth it? Was the risk worth the reward, or what you got out of it back then?
Completely, yeah. I'd say so. Back then, not so much. I mean, starting out, it wasn't like I was just coming up having all type of crazy money or anything. But the lessons I learned are more important than anything else. So I guess, you know, it's like, I don't know, 50-50. I can't really say because I didn't take that path. You know what I mean?
Did your parents ever find out of the street activity that you were involved with? I mean, obviously, there was a moment when you got kicked out from your dad, so you were getting
into... So he did find out at that point, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he found out, and it's not something I ever really verbalized. He kind of caught me, you know what I mean? But, like, anytime anybody ever asked me, I was just like, man, no. You know what I mean?
I see. In regards to school, you did graduate?
No, I dropped out 11th grade. When I was 16 and I first got kicked out, it was in 10th grade. And I finished that year off by the skin of my neck. And then the next year, you know, it was more difficult to go to school. I was really living out on my own at that point. I had a math class that I didn't go to once all year. I went to school like every day. I never went to that math class. It was like my last class of the day. And like maybe like 3-4 months through school, they told me like, man, you're not gonna graduate. You're not ever going to this class. And I was like, you know what? It's like either you're gonna have to do another year or you're gonna have to, you know, you can go get your GED. So I chose kind of just to be ahead of everybody instead of behind. I went and got my GED and got my equivalency diploma that year. I graduated a year early. I was supposed to graduate. Yeah. Now,
what got you to finish your GED? Was that self-motivated? Was that somebody in your ear supporting you to finish that? Because sometimes when people are involved with street activity, when they drop out of high school and they're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, they may choose to leave school behind and go full throttle with the street activity. It
was the process. The process of getting my GED was so easy, man. where I was living at the moment is Portland, Maine. And you know, I don't know about how things work other places, but I know in Minnesota and in Memphis, if you want to get your GED, you kind of have to go through some kind of program where you still have to go to some sort of school, maybe an alternative school or something. But in Maine, there's so many like it's crazy with immigration. The immigration laws are crazy out there. So many immigrants, like people that don't speak English, you know, because it's right on the border. People come from Cambodia, Somalia, all type of places, man. And so like they have this place, Portland Adult Education, and so you can go in there and take your GED test in a day or 2 days, you know what I mean, and just knock it out. So that was kind of the process, and you know, it was so easy. I never gave it a thought. I just went up there and did it the day after I went out of school. Got my GED the next day.
When you did drop out, did your parents ever find out?
Yeah, my dad had to sign off for me to drop out. Oh. So even though I was kicked out of the house, he did come up to my school and sign me out of school because he knew I wasn't going anyway, and it made more sense for me to just, you know, maybe work or whatever you know.
What was his reaction to that?
It was like, it was good but bad. He was like, man, I can't believe I'm doing this. That's all I remember him saying. I can't believe I'm doing this.
Now, somebody watching this, maybe they're 1 foot in school, 1 foot in street activity.
Yeah.
Is there any advice you have? Because circumstances could be different for everybody in this scenario too. But is there anything you would tell somebody that's 1 foot in, 1 foot out, like you were at one point?
I would tell them to stay in school because really, like, even though that's so contradicting, it's like, this shit is not promised, like, for everybody. Like, it really isn't. You know what I mean? I was blessed. Literally, I was blessed to make it out this shit. Like, blessed. Like, you know, and it came with a lot of tough times, you know, when I could have just chose a simpler path, but, you know, not that I necessarily wanted to be a knucklehead, but I felt like I had to be a knucklehead instead of going on the right path, or quote-unquote right path. But, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if you out there and your life was as terrible as mine, or you was going through the type of same stuff I was going through, who's to say, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not God, I don't know anything, so it's just like, you just live your life, you know, do what you feel. And do it, and you know what? Most all, not even do what you feel, do what you think, because logic is more important than how you feel. Like, sometimes you just gotta be logical. So that's my advice to kids out there. Like, just think about the future. They say live for the day, forget that. Like, think about tomorrow.
Now, thinking back of your life, was that your worst moment, your bottom point of your upbringing, was getting kicked out and being on your own, or was there a more worse point than that?
Nah. When I got kicked out, that felt like freedom. That was like my first taste of freedom. So it was bad, but I didn't feel like it was bad because I was free to indulge in whatever activities I wanted to indulge in at any time. So the lowest point in my life, I'd say, was probably when I was a kid and I didn't even realize it, but I just saw stuff happen. You know, I come home. You know, even though I had both parents, it's not like a happy-go-lucky, like, type of, you know, family life like you see on TV or something. No, it was like a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing. You know, they had their own issues. That sometimes I'd come home, the TV be gone. Sometimes I'll come home, couch will be gone. You know, just like stuff like that. So it's like, I don't know. That's probably the lowest time in my life, being a kid. I feel like as I got older and as I was able to make my own path and carve my own way out, things started to gradually get better. And me just keeping the mindset of doing what I wanted to do and being stubborn at it, you know what I mean? Like, not changing. That's the only thing. That's like what I got.
What did having that bottom point, what did that teach you? What did you learn from that?
What I learned from that, when I was a kid and I used to come home and my TV would be gone or my whatever would be gone, I just remember thinking that, man, I gotta support myself. Like, no matter what my parents are doing, nothing is like guaranteed. I felt like nothing was secured. The only thing that was secured was what I could possess for myself. You know what I mean? So that kind of got me thinking different. Got me stealing stuff when I was young, you know what I mean? Start doing all type of crazy stuff, but, you know, I don't know, you just learn from that.
Now, if that was your bottom point, on the opposite end of the spectrum, what was your highest point? Was it that freedom, that moment of freedom, even though it was bad and good at the same time, or was it a different point in your life during your upbringing?
Different point in my life. Different point in my life. When I started feeling like, it was the point where I felt like nothing. Like I felt unlimited to whatever I was doing, whatever activities I was indulging in, however I was getting it. It was coming, and I was having a great time, and that was probably like a few years ago, maybe like 2016, when I started like really eating off my lifestyle and like, you know, being able to move around and do the things that I wanted to do. That's when things, you know, that's probably like one of the highest points in my life. Traveling, going to places I want to go, stuff like that.
Mm. On the opposite end of that, though, that thought that you just pointed out, you were a kid, you were in school, you did move around a lot. Moving around for a kid can be a traumatic experience. There's some kids that grow up, I mean, you lived for 13 years, you grew up around the same people, I would assume, while you were in school in Memphis.
Yeah.
And then when you start going to these different cities, East Coast, Midwest and stuff, things have changed. But moving around and getting away from the people you grew up with, was that tough for you? Was it traumatic for you or not really?
I wouldn't call it traumatic. I'd call it a culture shock. Like, it shocked my brain. Like, I remember I'd be in Memphis and everything would be so slow. Things would be so country, similar to Atlanta, you know what I mean? But the thing about it is when I moved to the East Coast, everything got fast paced. Like, everything was like, people were moving quick, they were talking quick, it was different. And you know what, like, you know, people always hate where they're from. I love where I'm from because I learned to love it. But when I had first moved away, I was happy to get to the East Coast because I took all that in. It just made me part of who I am. So I love it. But yeah, man, it wasn't really, I guess, that traumatic. It was just more of a culture shock. One that I like. You know what I mean? I like culture shock.